I'm Harry Hepburn. I'm a clocksmith. I'm from Harrison, Maine. I've been working on clocks since 1968. And I'm going to talk to you folks about how I take in a clock to be repaired, the procedures that I go through, and then we'll take the clock apart and I will restore it for you folks. And this morning, I've picked a school clock. It's an 8-day time only. And it's in an oak case with what we call a pressed design in the wood itself. So, let's take this clock apart. And I first start, of course, by removing the hands. This particular one is not pinned to the shaft. So we're going to remove the hands, and this particular clock has a little nut that holds the minute hand, and then the hour hand is just on with a little sleeve over the shaft. Now we have to take out the screws that hold the dial in place, and we do that kind of by loosening all of the different screws up, and we'll start to remove the outer ones first, because this particular clock has the bezel. This is called the bezel, and the glass is the crystal, and it's attached to the dial. So we'll get that out of the way. One last screw. And you have to kind of hold things down because you don't want anything to pop and break. Carefully remove that, and there's the movement. This is the heart of the clock. This is what keeps time. So now we're going to remove the movement. There's usually 4 screws that hold the movement down, and it doesn't matter whether it's a 1-day clock, an 8-day clock, a clock that has a striking mechanism, or even some that have a mechanism that keeps Westminster chimes. This is called a train. This particular one has only the time train. That is the time train. This is the pendulum rod, suspension spring, the escapement wheel, and the verge. I'll put the case out of the way, and now I'm going to remove the suspension spring because they're delicate and you don't want to bend these. If they get bent, it's never going to keep time. So I put that aside. Now we're going to go back to the workbench and disassemble this movement after we put a spring retainer on here and check all the bearings. All right, so now that I've gotten back to the bench, now I'm going to have to analyze what I need to do to restore this clock. And the first thing I have to do is get one of these. And these are for letting down the spring. But because of the fact that the spring's up right now, I've got to take it up a little more. And then I get a spring retainer, and I'll stick it on the mainspring. We relieve the mainspring because we need to be able to have the no pressure on the various bearings. So what I've done is I've removed the spring that's on the click, and I'm going to give it a little bit of and then this allows me, by holding onto this, it applies friction and allows this mainspring to open up, and without going zing, I'm able to hold back with that little mechanism right there. So now I have the pressure's off, and I'm going to check the bearings. Well, I can see this one bearing right here is running a little loose, so I'm going to put a new bushing in there. And so I'll circle that. And yeah, everything else looks pretty good. Check the escapement. That's already been bushed at one time, so was that. It looks like this had been worked on before. We've got another loose one right there. So I think I'm going to fix that one as well. I'm going to remove the verge. And this little mechanism here just sits on top of that pin and keeps the verge in place. And so I'll remove the verge. That's in good shape. What we're going to do, take this apart, then it's going to go through a series of repairs to the pinion areas, and then we're going to run it through a cleaner. We get one of these little guys right here. We'll take the nuts off of this. And you know, one of the ways that I'm able to know who made a particular clock is with the movement out. It says right there, E. Ingram Company, Bristol, Connecticut, USA. Take it apart. And I examine the teeth. I examine these little areas right here, these little axles, we refer to as pinions. And this is, the pinions look good. They don't seem to have any bad wear in them. So that's good. And we start to disassemble it. I want the first gear, which is this one. The pinions look good. This is the number 2 gear. This one's already marked. And this is number 3, and that's already marked. And I'm pretty sure it was the 3rd one. Yeah, the 3rd one that I want. And I want to check that and see the pinions are good, the teeth are good. Everything looks good. I have a ton of tools. You need all kinds of different tools because there's so many different varieties of clocks that come in. You hear some cuckoos in the back. Now you hear one of the grandfather clocks that I've been working on, and they're scattered throughout the shop. So, tools, tons. And I use most of them, quite frankly. So, we're going to check the front of this gear. And according to the micrometer, that's 62 thousandths. So I referred to my chart, and I'm going to use a number 19 bushing. The 19 is the size of the bearing that I'm going to use. This is my worksheet. I will mark down cleaning, oil, and adjusting. But then I do bushings, because I know I'm going to have to do them. And I know I have to do front 1 and rear 3. So now I'll go back to the 3rd gear in the train, and I'm going to mic the back side of that, and that is 52 thousandths. So we're going to use a number 17 for that. So I mark those down. Okay, now it's time to replace some bearings. So what do? I'm going to mark the back side because I drill from. I want to know where I am all the time with this. And now we're going to go back to my drill press. So now I'm back at my drill presses. And this old guy, both of them are pretty old. I've had this one ever since I started, I think. And it's just an old Delta. And I love this press. This one I use for heavier duty drilling. This one is the one that I use most of the time. And I've made up, a number of blocks. And you can see that I've done my share of drilling with these, because this was one that I used for years, and then I replaced it with this one. But I keep it around still because I need to use it from time to time. I've installed a number 37 drill in the chuck, and that's going to be the one that I drill these out with. And so I need this to be absolutely perfect. One. And that was easy. Those are drilled out. And now we're going to go back to the bench and install the new bushings. Now, we know what size bushings we need. I can put the micrometer away. I'm finished with that. But now we go into the drawer of bushings. And these are the bushings. And I have, I could buy probably, 50 or so different sizes. But over the years, I've ascertained that I only really need a minimal amount. And I guess 20 is a minimal amount. And that's what I have here. But in this particular case, and these are cases of bushings, and then these are brooches, which I'll need as well and there's different sizes brooches that I have to use. I have a little tool that I chamfer with. So I'm going to go grab my drill, and I always chamfer the edge a little bit so that I can get by that post. Just a little teeny bit. And now we're going to bring out, this is a staking tool. That's what all of this over here is. This is a staking tool. This is what I primarily use. I just use a punch, and you can see that one's been pretty well mushroomed. It was flat, just like this one originally. But I've done a lot of hammering with that. For the first one, I'm going to be using a number 19 bushing. I'll take one of those out. I don't know if you can get a good enough view of that, but one end is countersunk. The other end is flat. And so we're going to have the flat end up because we want the chamfered countersunk end to face forward. Okay, I've got that lined up. Nice. Well, this is a very thin plate, so I'm going to change my stake, my little anvil. This one's hollowed out so that I'm able to, I don't want any of the bushing protruding through the back of the plate. It needs to be smooth because you need to allow the gear to breathe. And if I have some of the bushing projecting through the back, the gear's not going to breathe. So I'd like to close up this guy until I'm ready to use it again. Change the anvils, ready for the next one. And front one is here. And we check to see if it fits. It doesn't. Knew it didn't. Because as I said, I have a collection of bushings that I use so that I'm able to broach them out to the clearances that I want them to be. Just by turning this is like a little reamer, some people would call it, and I check it to see how close I'm getting. Getting there. Takes a little while, but I'd rather take the time and know that I'm getting it to the right clearances, because we want this clock to run now for another 100 years. So we want to make sure that we get it right. That feels pretty good. Champ for the back end of it. And I actually like to go to the front and clean out anything in the front. And I go to a little blower when there's a lot of residue from my broaching. I might brush it out first and then blow to make sure that I've got it where I want it. I'm going to put the gear back in a plate the way it should go. I'll put the plate back together. Get the gear in there. Get it set. I don't screw it together, I just kind of hold it. And then I manually check the gear for spin. Check to see that it's nice and snug but has a little play. Check to make sure that the gear is able to breathe. It has a little bit of movement back and forth. That's good. This one only has 2 bad bearings. I've had some where I've had to do 20 bad bearings. So you need to be able to check them off and identify what's going on and what's been done and what hasn't been. This one's ready for the cleaning. The next one we're going to check is the number 3 bearing, and we know that that's going to take a 17, a number 17. And that one is in this corner. So I get that out. Bring out my staking tool. I give it a little tap to see that the bushing is starting to seat properly, straight and true. So it's going good. So I give it another one. That's good. And hopefully I'm done with this guy for today. So now we're going to check and see. This is the front. All right. The brooch. As I've said before, I have a million different brooches that I use. I think this one will be okay. Yeah. So I'll go to this one. Checking in the intervals to make sure that I'm not going too far. Because you can get carried away with these things and start spinning them around, and you get it. It's starting to go in now. It's getting snug. So we're going to go a little easier with this now. And I rock it back and forth like this to make sure that I'm straight both ways as I'm going in. And as I'm broaching it out, to make sure that I'm going to go a little more. It's in there, but it's not as loose as I'd like it to be. So I'm going to give it just another delicate little spin. Brush it. And we'll take and champ for the back. That gets rid of any burrs that might be on the back. And I champ for the front of the bearing because there may be a little burr on there. And this is like an oil cup right here that when I'm finished, I'll apply oil, and that kind of seals everything out. And you don't want to burr in the way. You want that oil to be able to flow into that axle area effectively. I think that's all right, but I'm not sure. I may have to go back to that. But that's why we check it. And that's why we check everything. And if we have to do it more than one time, so be it. It's got to be right. I think that's a little tight. It's spinning okay, but I think it's just a little tight. So I'm going to give it a little more opening. And deburr and blow and back together, because I think it'll be fine now. Yeah, I like that a lot better. It feels much, much better. Checking for end slap. Good. Okay. Take one of And I have all kinds of little trays and things that I use. These are from my kitty's cat food, and they're wonderful. I started throwing them away, and then I thought, geez, wouldn't these be wonderful for some of my parts? I've got to do one more thing here. I've got to remove the mainspring from the main gear. And the way you do that is you take it, hopefully, in the opposite direction. And it pops out. Sometimes it doesn't. We have to be a little more creative. There we go. So we're ready to put this clock movement through the cleaning machine. So let's go to the cleaning machine and we'll go through that series. I've got to remove the retainer from the mainspring because the mainspring has to be allowed to relax so that the cleaning solution gets into it. So to do that, I have rags, old pajamas, and I put that on there, and I work the retainer off. That protects my hands. These things can take off a finger if you're not careful. So
wait, what?
Mainsprings, if they break in your hands, or if they, like, for instance, taking the retainer off, if you do it without covering yourself, these can be sharp. These can create a lot of cuts. I've gotten cut by them. I try my best to protect myself, as you'll see later, but when I rewind this, but these can be very, very treacherous to anyone who is working with them. You have to take care. So this is my clean. This is an ultrasonic cleaner. These are just plastic baskets that fit in my ultrasonic cleaner. This is an old ultrasonic cleaner. I've got a big one back here that's new. It's an LNR. I use this one because it only takes a gallon of solution. This one takes 3 gallons. I don't need anything this large for the most part. For this movement right here that is in front of your camera, I needed to use this large cleaning machine. But for the most part, this little one, and I bought this from a friend of mine who bought the contents of the Waltham Clock Company in Waltham, Massachusetts. And this is a cleaning machine that they used in their clock and watch department. So that's kind of fun. Now I'm going to put all of these parts in the basket. You can see I make do with a lot of different things. Coat hanger hooks of all different sizes. Now this gets dropped into the cleaning solution. The lid goes on, and I turn it on. And I leave that for 30 minutes. Sometimes if the movement is really filthy, I may allow it to soak in that solution for an hour or two, perhaps more. But this one was pretty clean, so half an hour is suffice. Now the half hour's up, and we're ready to rinse. So try and drain all the stuff out so I'm not running all over the place. And I wipe the excess fluid off of each one of the parts. After I've wiped the excess, I have little hooks that I've made up, and they will go into the rinse. I also do the same with all of the gears, and they go into a little basket that I made up, oh God, years ago. I still use the doggone thing. I want to get the excess cleaning solution off because you can't get it all. And over time, it will contaminate the rinse. So in order to maintain as much longevity with the rinse as possible, I take these precautions. And the mainspring itself comes out, and then I stretch it out as I wipe the excess off. And I get down to about there, and I think that's far enough. These are done. I've talked to different fellas that are involved with clock repair, and some just use water. I prefer to use what the company has provided for us because I think that it helps to displace the water. And if for some reason you didn't get everything totally dry, you have kind of a nice soft coating within the parts. So these have been wiped. I put them on another homemade deal. All it is an old floor heater, 1500 amp heater that you might use in the middle of the winter when you get a little cold. Another piece of screening, a piece of wood that I've attached to give it some stability. And I plug that in, and that's my dryer. And so I haven't deviated a lot from when I first started doing all this. Now I'm going to drop the mainspring in, and I'll drop these gears that are in the basket into the rinse. I usually leave those in there for maybe 5 minutes or so. And I take them out, and there, again, on a hibachi thing. You can see I utilize all kinds of different things that I found that work for me. I haven't deviated all that much. I even use the lathe that I started with, which is back there. That's the old lathe that I use in straightening out various parts and making parts. All kinds of older things that Harry Hepburn still thinks works pretty good and hasn't bothered to change. So with that, these have drained enough. I'm going to wipe the excess solution off of these. I think that we've allowed enough time. Oh yeah, that's hot. I like to really heat them up because that way it really gets rid of any excess liquid that's in there. And even though I've used the special rinse, I still don't want to have any of it linger for when I put the movement back together. That's done, and now we're going to put all the little gears and things, and I like to put the ones that have tubes or hollow areas or things that are attached, like all of this, on first because I want them to get the hottest. I want to make sure that they really get warmed up so that we get good drying. Moisture's not good, even though this is an oil-based rinse. I still find it important to make sure that all of that gets dried up thoroughly before I start to put the clock back together again. I also have a compressor underneath the desk here that I use when I have things that I really can't get to that well, the cleaner or the rinse. So then I'll start up the compressor, which makes a hell of a lot of noise. And then I'll blow the various pieces to get as much of the liquid off as I could possibly get. I've unplugged the heater. Everything's hotter than I like it. No, it's fine. It's good and hot. But now we've got to clear off as much of the liquid as possible from this. And at this point, I take the corner of the rag and I go in and I thoroughly clear the inner portions of the spring. Done. Now we're going to go back to the bench. We're going to lubricate the spring. I do that. These are rags soaked in the lubricant that I use for the springs. And I stretch the springs out. lubricate as much this way as I can, bringing them back. I'm done with that rag. Now I'll go to these little strips that I've made up that are also, that have that lubricant on them. And those I will work through the smaller bits of the spring so that where I couldn't get, where it wouldn't stretch out all the way. And I'm able to bring that right down to where it connects into the winding arbor. And then out they come. Now we have to wind that spring back up again so that I can put it back into the movement. For that, I have spring winders. I have that one, and then that's an antique, but I have used it on various occasions. I also have this one. These two are the ones that I use the most. This goes in the vise. Before I put the spring back on its arbor, I like to lubricate the parts that I can't not get to after everything's together. So I'm going to lubricate the click, and I like to put a little oil on the ratchet part. So then I kind of wind it around a little bit to give it to evenly distribute the lubricant or the oil. Now that goes in the arbor, tightened up. When I first started out, I started marking the gears and everything else, and I was unsure of where things went. I've continued with that policy even today, when I know where everything goes, without even having to mark it, but I still have it marked, and I still look at my marks, because that way I don't make mistakes, or at least I don't make many. I try not to. So the mainspring's marked with a little arrow. That tells me that it goes in against the gear. One doesn't have to worry about that. All I have to do is figure out which way this is going and how it's going to connect in the spring and wind, and that's all you have to really worry about. But I mark it anyway. So this goes on the winding arbor. I get it started. I don't go any further until I've put my leather glove on. As I had said before, these things let loose. Spring steel is you don't know what it's going to do. It could break. A brand new spring could break while you're winding it, or an old one. So I always wear a leather glove when handling springs, even sometimes when with the glove on. The spring has come up unattached and it smacks me in this hand, or it'll hit the glove so hard that you feel it. So we wind this guy up. And then we'll take that spring retainer that we took off a little while ago, and we'll put it on. I just relieve some of the pressure, and now we go back again. It'll be fine. With the pressure off, I'll remove the glove. Not necessary now. Loosen up the arbor and remove it. And we're ready now to reassemble. So the mainspring goes on that shaft and goes into its little hole. Lubricating various parts as I go along this shaft. I like to stick a little bit of lubricant on because it's in this channel. Spin it and stick it in its position. This is called the idler gear. That goes in right here in that hole. This gear allows you to advance the time once things are together without the chance of it blowing a tooth. It's kind of like a clutch mechanism. So here's gear one. We put that in Now we go to gear 2, gear 3. Everything's back together again, ready for the front plate to be put on. This particular movement has a slot, so I can slide the escapement wheel in after I've started to put this together. Go back to my... So we've got it held down in the back part, so now I can work on putting the gears back in their holes properly. We'll install the escapement wheel. Finding the various places that the pinion has to go. I'll try holding it so you can see what I'm doing. Getting the various little pinions or axles back into their bearing surfaces where they should be. And now things have gone together. Kind of hold everything in place and put the little nuts back on. And take my little wrench and tighten them up. Seems to be going around pretty good. So at this point, I start to lubricate. I find it in a lot of cases when I'm lubricating, you'll notice how it'll quiet down as I start to put the lubricant into the various areas. I lubricate anything that touches anything else. I make sure that they're well lubricated. It just takes a drop of oil. I'm not afraid to use a little extra lubricant. Now I'll install the verge back again. Oh, before I do that, because these areas touch as well, I apply a little bit of lubricant to them. That sounds like that little banjo clock going off. All right. A little bit of oil in there, and I'm done with the oil. Going along quite nicely, isn't it? Okay, so I guess I'm going to remove the spring retainer. That's not necessary anymore. And now it's time to put the movement back in the case, put the suspension spring back on, hang the case up with the pendulum all set up, and make any adjustments that I have to make so that when the customer gets the clock, they can put a level. Now on the school clock like that, it's not as easily done. But on a lot of clocks that I do, I set it up by putting a level on the clock. Then I listen for an even tick-tock. And if it doesn't have an even tick-tock, then I will readjust it and what we call in beat. So I'll adjust it in beat on a level surface, so that when the customer gets the clock back, they can place a level on the clock or wherever I tell them the level should go, hang the pendulum, wind it up, and it should go fine. So now let's put the movement back into the case. In it goes. Now just snug them down with a regular screwdriver to make sure everything's nice and tight. and the movement's going to hold in the case. And I'm going to replace the suspension spring. I like to make sure that the hook is out so we can, and that goes in that little slot right there. And then goes through the crotch. And eventually the pendulum will hang off of it. But it's not ready for that yet. So we have a friction area here where this rod goes through the crotch of the verge. And so I apply a little bit of oil there. And believe it or not, it makes a huge difference sometimes. Sometimes I'll hear a squeak or a little noise, and I can't figure out where the heck it is. Well, that area has not been lubricated properly. So give it a little bit of oil and off she goes. All right, with that, let's put the hands back on. I chose this clock because it's a one-day clock. It's a lot simpler to set up than a time and strike clock. Check to see which way the hand goes on. Sometimes the hands look so much the same on both sides, so you have to kind of check them out. And now I'm going to have to hang it up. We're going to have to go back in the back somewhere, hang it up, and make sure that this clock is in beat and that it's ready to go back. It'll be ready to go back to the customer, but I leave the clock on the wall or on the table for usually about a week to make sure that everything's working properly and that I'm not going to have any issues. So now we're going to we're not going to put the dial back on, by the way, until after I've had it on the stand and I've made all the necessary adjustments that I have to make, and that I'm happy enough that the clock is going to run and keep time. Doesn't have to keep accurate time at this point because that adjustment is made when I install the pendulum and I run it for a couple of days and watch to make sure whether it's gaining or losing time, and then I'll make those adjustments accordingly. Are we ready to hang this?
Yeah.
Let's hang it. It's very difficult with one of these clocks to get a level on it, because when these were put together back around this is about from 1890. This, if you put a level on this and this, it'll be different. This is different because of the way the cases were put together, and plus the fact that it's over 100 years old. So things change. So on a clock like this, I just try and eyeball it to where I think it looks good. And now we'll hang the pendulum, attach this little guy. Now this amplifies the beat. You can hear it a lot louder now. And I allow the pendulum to run a little bit so it reaches its own level of power. Well, I can tell you right now that it's out of beat. All right, so now I'm going to adjust this into beat. Well, that's no good. Too much. No. Takes a little bit of time. Too much. Sometimes these things are very, very delicate. Just the slightest little bit of adjustment can throw them into the opposite direction. I have to be careful. So now, sounds good. Nice even tick-tock. Now I go to my meter. We're looking for balance. Quiet it down a little bit. Boy, not much. This is loud with the slightest noises affect this. Get it as close to zero as possible. And there we go. It's pretty straight on the wall. We're going to assume that I've had this clock on the wall for a couple of days, and I'm satisfied with it's keeping good time, or reasonably good time at this point, and that I don't have to make any more adjustments. So we're going to go back now to the table and install the dial so that the clock will be complete. We'll then bring the clock back to its hanging point, and I'll let it run for another couple of days. Watch to make sure that it's not running too fast or too slow. And when I get it to that point where I'm satisfied with the way it is, then I call the customer and say it's time for you to pick up your clock. So let's go back to the table and plug in the dial. And never move a pendulum clock with the pendulum on. You always remove the pendulum, and the reason for that is this little suspension spring here that I've talked about before, where I hung in that little slot. If that bends because of the pendulum twisting and banging against things, then it's going to knock it out a beat. Time to go back to the table. All right, so we're back at the table. We take the hands off. Everything's been lubricated properly. We've set it and beat. It's run for a couple of days, one would assume. And I'm happy enough that I'm not going to have to get in here and make any more adjustments. So now I'm going to put the dial back in place. And we'll screw that guy down. Actually, once you get these 3 in, it's secure enough that you don't have to hold on to the dial. With a striking clock, you never move the minute hand backwards because you can break things or bend things out of shape. You always move it in a clockwise direction. But we're only dealing with a time-only clock, and so we're able to, and then you move this around to make sure it's clearing. Perfect. So there we are. Everything is back in order. The clock would go back on the wall to be timed. While I have it here, clean the glass off a little bit, because, you know, from handling it, you get fingerprints and things on the glass. And a lot of times when I get these clocks, they're filthy dirty anyway. And so it helps to at least clean up the glasses. And that's it. That's how I take care of fixing a clock for a customer or myself, because I have a lot of clocks of my own that I have for sale. So I have to make sure that they're in good running condition so that I can guarantee them for the customers. So I do the same thing with everybody. My price schedule is the same for everybody. Doesn't matter whether the clock's worth 10 cents or $10,000. It still takes me the same amount of time to work on them, so my price schedule is the same for all clocks and all people. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I look forward to your comments.